Hello, my name is Chelsea Martinez, and I want to welcome you to the Wetlands and the Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area for today's Bucks for Ducks video event. Wetlands, and in particular the Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area, provide many benefits, not only as critical habitat for many species of animals, but also for humans in reducing impacts during floods, agriculturally for food, and as special places for recreation. First up today, you'll hear from some of our educators and students about why wetlands are important. This video is an example of what students might see and learn about when they participate in our Discover the Flyway school program. You may have driven on I-80 between Davis and Sacramento, but do you know what goes on below the causeway in the Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area? We'll hear from Joe Hobbs, the Wildlife Area Manager. He works for the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, who manages the Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area. Joe will talk about how they manage the area for the multiple benefits it provides. And finally, you'll see a video of the construction that went on this summer as part of the Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area Habitat and Drainage Improvement Project. The improvements will allow for better water movement and control in managing the wetlands and agricultural fields. And yes, they received special permission to take the cool aerial drone footage of this project. So here we go. Enjoy!
Welcome to the Wetlands. I'm Heidi Satter, Education Coordinator for Yolo Basin Foundation, and I'm standing here in the Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area, over 16,000 acres of restored and recreated wetlands. One of the reasons these wetlands are important is because only about 5% of California's original wetlands still remain. Maybe you've been to one of those wetlands. Maybe you've been to these wetlands. But do you know what a wetland is and why it's important? Wetlands are land that is near or underwater at least part of the year, with special plants, animals, and soils that are specially adapted to life in water.
What is the function of a wetland? Well, they have several, but here at the Yolo Bypass, the primary function of this wetland is flood control, keeping the cities around us from flooding when the rivers get too high.
The wetlands are important because they provide clean water and a healthy habitat for animals.
Hi, my name is Corky, and I'm with Yolo Basin Foundation, and I want to share with you about why wetlands are important. Wetlands are important for so many reasons, but one of my very favorite is for our migratory waterfowl, our ducks and geese and swans that come and spend the winter with us. And you can see behind me many different kinds of birds enjoy the wetlands. California used to have a lot of wetlands throughout the Central Valley. Most of those are now gone. So having stopovers in wetlands like the Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area is vital for our migratory bird populations when they're coming through here on their migration vacation.
Hi, I'm Ken Ely. I've been a volunteer with the Yolo Basin Foundation for several years, and I have also volunteered with the Discover the Flyway program. I think wetlands are important because of the habitats it provides for several different species of animals, from birds, mammals, insects, reptiles, and fish. But more importantly for humans, I think wetlands are important because the wetland soil and the native wetland plants act as sponges and filters. So it filters the water that reaches down to the water table, which is where humans get most of our water through wells, private wells, and community wells. So wetlands are something that we must conserve and preserve.
Our wetlands are important because they provide food for wildlife and humans. For example, rice is grown and harvested in the Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area. After a harvest, any leftover seed feeds many migratory birds in the winter.
The wetlands are important because they provide open space and a habitat for plants that improve water and air quality.
Wetlands are important because they provide special places for us to enjoy. We can enjoy them by bird watching, hiking, hunting, fishing, as inspiration for art or photography. They're also great places to relax, enjoy yourself, center yourself away from the busyness of everyday life.
The Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area is owned and operated by the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. Yolo Basin Foundation provides the education here in the wetlands. What this means is, this land belongs to you. It's owned by the state of California and the people of California. It's a perfect place to come out and learn more about why wetlands are important.
Hi, my name is Joe Hobbs. I am the area manager for the Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area. It's just under 17,000 acres here in the Yolo Bypass. We have many different types of habitats such as seasonal wetlands, permanent wetlands, vernal pools, grassland, and uplands. Now the Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area is part of the Pacific Flyway, which all the ducks from Alaska and Canada funnel back down and winter in the Central Valley. 95% of the wetlands within the Central Valley have been lost due to agriculture and habitat conversion for houses and things like that. There used to be 4 million acres within the Central Valley that was considered wetlands. Now there's around 170,000 acres. The Central Valley in California winters between 4 to 9 million birds each winter. That's a huge number of waterfowl that are coming into the limited habitat that is left. So the area itself is open from sunrise to sunset every single day of the year except for Christmas. We give our employees 1 day off. We have a gate on the front entrance that's open at sunrise, and then we close it at sunset, so everybody needs to be out by the closing of the gate. There is approximately a 5-mile auto tour, and we have several different hiking trails that we encourage people to use, and we're actually trying to get better signage up for that so people can find them easier. On the wildlife area itself, the majority of the wildlife area, there are no bikes, no horses, or no pets allowed during the general use of the season. Well, there is an area north of the causeway that we do allow people to ride bikes and have their dogs out there. The area is open to hunting, our portion of it each year. Our hunting season is, dove season is the first 2 weeks of September. Waterfowl season usually kicks in somewhere around mid-October and runs till the end of January. So again, the portion of the wildlife area is open for hunting during that time period. We also have pheasant hunting, which is from November to towards the end of December. So waterfowl and pheasants are our two main hunting programs here on the wildlife area. So within the wildlife area, again, like I talked about, we have many different kinds of habitats, such as the seasonal wetlands, which are most of the stuff that you see here behind me are seasonal wetlands. So they're not flooded all year. We will start flooding these up in September, October, and then drain them sometime in March and April. So this basically has a growing season. So the plants you see now on the bottom or on the ground here are plants that provide seed for the wintering waterfowl. This is swamp timothy. It has a little seed head. It's one of the top 3 foods for ducks to use in the winter. Then you also see, intermittent cattail stands and tules, which help break up the pond itself. So the seasonal wetlands, again, highly productive. Everything that after we draw the water down, the plants grow. Sometimes we'll be able to irrigate those plants just like you would in a garden, give them a shot of water and they'll produce more seeds. So the permanent wetlands are ponds that we leave water in just about all year. Sometimes we'll have to draw them down to help manage vegetation, such as primrose, which is an invasive species, or the cattails and tules start to fill in the permanent pond and we have no more open water for the critters. So the other thing that we have here on Yolo that a lot of wildlife areas don't have in the same number or acres that we have is grasslands or uplands. So we have quite a few acres of uplands, so we still have a good thriving pheasant population. A lot of ground nesting birds use those uplands. And then also we have in a portion of the wildlife area our vernal pools, which is a pretty unique habitat type. It's in our very southeastern end. Those collect rainwater over the winter and then slowly dry up on their own, and you'll see vernal pool flowers that ring around those particular ponds. It's pretty impressive as well. So one other thing that's unique about the wildlife area is we have an active agricultural lease, or actually we have 3 agricultural leases on the wildlife area. We have approximately 2,000 acres, mostly in the northern end of the wildlife area, that's in rice production. So our grower produces white rice and wild rice, depending on the year and the different conditions, like when the floodwaters come off, what he can or cannot plant for that time frame. And then we also have a grazing lease in the pretty much central to southern end of the wildlife area. There's around 4,500 acres that are dedicated to grazing. We have upland grazing, there are pastures that are irrigated, and then dryland pastures, different combinations of those. And then we also just started a new lease in the North Causeway unit that's cattle grazing as well. So again, that income from those leases help pay for the wildlife area's operation and budget. So if you think your PG&E bill is high, my PG&E bill each year is about $300,000. And that's just for the electricity costs to move that water alone. Doesn't matter, that does not include the infrastructure and the time for people to operate those pumps and those ditches and those water conveyance systems. So it's a pretty complex system. We also have to operate that system in conjunction with our ag users. So rice is using water during the summer when the wetlands are typically not using them. We do have overlap at the beginning of the season when they start growing rice, and when we start flooding up for the winter, they are drawing their rice fields down and getting ready to harvest. So again, it's a shared system. It takes cooperation. All my ag leasees so far have been really great to work with, and they help fund the wildlife area. So one of the questions I get is on the management of the wildlife area. This system here is a highly altered system. It's no longer flooding on its own natural course. It's all man-made flooding. Again, we are in a bypass, so this basically, the area that the wildlife area is in, takes floodwaters around Sacramento, so Sacramento doesn't flood, and then pushes it further to the south and out into the delta. So that system is completely manipulated. So to flood this area up when we want it to, we have low lift pumps which take water from the tow drain. As the delta tides come in, it pushes fresh water back into that system. We're able to catch it with those low lift pumps, put it into ditches that are higher than the fields that they're in, and then it's gravity fed out from there into the actual individual wetland fields. Again, all our rivers that operate within the system are dammed, so Folsom, Shasta, again, all highly manipulated and managed systems. And then after below lifted pumps, again, we have man-made water control structures. Okay, now I want to give you an example of a water control structure. This one is a screw gate with a flashboard riser. You can see the metal gate itself controlled by the wheel at the top, can raise or lower to allow certain amounts of water to come in or out of the pond, depending on if it's a flood up screw gate or a drain screw gate. And then again, these slots, as you can see, you can put boards in those and set the water level within the pond at that depth. So if we have the boards up to here, you can see like a typical water level stain on here. This will be the high end of the pond. Water will go pretty shallow over here, will go up to there, and the rest of the pond will be flooded. But again, 2 sets of slots that we can put boards in that can stop the water and set it at the level that we want. So this, combined with a lot of the other management activities that we do, again, we have from our low lift pumps, we have discharge pipes, which are huge pipes. I'm talking 18 to 24 inch pipes. that those pumps will push out, we have 50 horsepower, 75 horsepower pumps that put out a lot of water to flood this wildlife area up in a timely fashion. So in conjunction, like these screw gates and those discharge pipe, what we call swales, which are basically just a little bit lower areas in the wildlife area. Consider it like a road that's slightly lower. So the water will travel along that road first from the entry to the exit of the pond and then slowly fill up from there. So we can get that swale full of water, and then if we want to put water up on the upper benches, from there we crank up the water comes up, and we want to draw it off. You can draw it off those benches back into that swale. It makes the water control a little bit more easy and quickly irrigate those areas that we want. So one thing you can't see here is, because we are in a bypass or pump stations, we have elevated pump stations. Instead of what you'll see on a normal area, is like, there may just be a pump over here that sits right next to the road that you can do it. Ours are going to be elevated 15, 16 feet, so they're above the floodwaters. So when the area does flood wall to wall, those pumps, the electric motors and all that are not inundated with water. So again, we'll have the elevated pump stands. The other thing that we do is, depending on the time of year, how we manage that water. So like in early spring, we may start drawing those ponds down, March, April, sometime in there. Then we're going to have mud flats. So we're still going to have water, but we're going to have some exposed mud flats. So the shorebirds will come in and use those. You'll see dunlins, sandpipers, blackneck stilts, stuff like that, depending on the time of the year, come in and use those real shallow areas that are full of crustaceans and little insects for them to get. And then as the water gets deeper in the winter, you'll see things like tundra swans and pelicans in the deeper water units. So we'll have a variety of habitat types, water depths, again, throughout the whole entire year. The other things we do, control vegetation. You'll see there's a lot of stuff in this pond. So typically we would go through, and if we want to set the vegetative community back to open stuff up, we can disc portions of that pond. That really, just like farming, it breaks open the soil, makes stuff grow a little bit easier, kills or gets rid of the vegetation that may not be wanted in that particular pond. We can also mow things, like we'll have cocklebur and other plants that don't really produce a seed head for the wildlife, so we'll mow strips with those, or mow a whole pond that has those. We will also spray invasive species, like we have star thistle, pepperweed, just a lot of stuff that's pretty nasty and it's not wildlife friendly. So we do use chemical treatments to try to set those back. We try not to use the chemicals, but per acre and per cost, they're pretty cost effective to use. So you'll see an area that we may have swamp timothy, which is a good seed head growing underneath. Then you'll have cocklebur come in, maybe in combination with sunflower, and shade that timothy out. So those are growing, they're really high, the swamp timothy's low. We may go in and mow that pond before the cocklebur puts seed on, to allow sunlight to hit that swamp timothy and then really produce a good vigorous seed heads. So the other thing, as soon as you have a wetland and you live anywhere near town, you're going to have mosquitoes, okay? And that can be a problem. It can be human health issues. Wetlands can produce a lot of mosquitoes. So we work with our local mosquito abatement district to have best management practices of how we manage the water, how we manipulate the ponds before we flood or while they're flooded. They'll come out and check the ponds to see what type of mosquito production we are getting. If we're producing too many mosquitoes, they will treat those ponds. Typically, we will tell them, hey, we're going to flood, pond 15, September 1. They may go out and pre-treat that pond with a larvicide. If it's been a pond that over the time has produced a lot of mosquitoes, they may do a larvicide in conjunction with an adulticide later if they start getting a heavier mosquito population. Part of our agricultural lease, specifically with the rice lease, is shorebird fields. So they have a set number of acres each year that they'll flood up for 2 30-day stretches, typically in July and August, for shorebirds. So they'll set aside rice fields that would typically be in rice production, shallowly flood that field anywhere from just barely wet to maybe a couple inches. So what happens after that's flooded for 15, 20 days, vegetation starts growing in there, the shorebird use declines, we'll turn the water off on that pond or that unit, and then maybe like August 1, August 4th, start flooding another unit to try to catch those shorebirds that are in migration, so they have an area that's usable for them. On a wildlife area, and especially a wildlife area in a floodplain, one of the main things we do is road maintenance. Specifically in this wildlife area, because we have agricultural equipment, huge harvesters, rice trucks, just really heavy tonnage vehicles, high public use on the auto tour. You know, our wildlife area guys, backhoes, excavators, graders, all that are using their road system. It takes a beating, you know, and then when those roads get wet, people drive on them, they get rutted, they get pitted, it makes it for a really quite bumpy ride. You throw on that if we go wall-to-wall water, you know, on a flood year, it'll scour portions of the road, it pushes the gravel off portions of the road. So almost all year, whenever we can operate, we are trying to maintain the road or fix the road system. That could be adding gravel, grading the road, pushing soil back on it to make the road drivable. You know, some spots that probably some people have seen that aren't on the main road, but they're pretty narrow at times because, you know, dirt has sloughed off and it makes it pretty narrow to go over a 10-foot wide ditch and a 9-foot truck. We have rice and we have livestock. Right now that livestock happens to be cattle. Again, those leases pay for a good chunk of change on the wildlife area for its operation and employees. Roughly the total value is well over $600,000 in those leases to help operate the wildlife area. That money is matched with federal monies, what's called a Pittman-Robertson grant. It's a federal grant. It's an excise tax on firearms and ammunition and sporting goods. So it's matched 3 to 1. So all the money that the state puts up as match is 3 times the amount of it comes from the federal government as well. So, and that money is what we use to operate the wildlife area. It's well over $1 million in operation costs for this wildlife area each year. And that's if nothing breaks, and stuff always breaks. So not only, you know, the agriculture on the wildlife area provides income to the actual wildlife area, but it produces food and jobs in the community. So again, beef production on the wildlife area, rice, this is the sushi grade rice that you'll see. The other portion that they have is in wild rice. You'll see that in the markets. So it's a win-win from everybody. It's roughly 4,500 acres that are in grazing. There's both irrigated and dry land. Like I said before, right now that's in cattle production. So that usually typically they come on in April and we'll pull them off sometime. They start pulling them off before hunting season, but it'll go all the way through December. In portions of the area, like in the vernal pools, so we actually graze those on purpose to keep the invasive species back so the vernal pool flowers can flourish. Otherwise they'd just be overtaken and they wouldn't be there. The other thing is disease. As we've condensed the amount of available wetlands in the flyway greatly, you're basically concentrating waterfowl in small areas. So one of the things we have to worry about is avian cholera, which is typically in late winter. Birds are stressed, food resources have been depleted, it's cold, some birds will get sick, and because they're in close proximity, that can spread pretty quickly. The other one that's usually in the warmer months is avian botulism. So again, water just comes out, birds find it, they're in tight concentration, it's warm, that helps the bacteria, you know, grow, and we'll sometimes see a die-off in August, September, maybe even into October for avian botulism. And typically the cholera is in January, February, and depending on the yearly conditions for that. So what we typically do is go out and try to pick up as many of the carcasses as we can to basically decrease the spread of that disease from bird to bird. So those carcasses are no longer going to be there, we'll pull them out, we have an incinerator at the wildlife area, then we'll typically incinerate those carcasses. The majority of the water comes from the delta through tidal action, again, that's pushed up in the tow drain, which runs north to south on the east side of the wildlife area. We take that out with low lift pumps. We do have, I think, 3 wells on the wildlife area. We really do not run those hardly at all. Again, 95% of our water comes from surface water. In a yearly fashion, so January, again, the area is fully flooded up. All the rice fields are flooded. You'll see just a plethora of birds. You know, all the birds that are under winter are typically here in January, and that's December, January is pretty much the peak of the waterfowl migration. So the other thing I want to mention, you know, that, again, Yolo is unique in several ways. One of the other things that it's unique about is we have the I-80 bridge that goes across the wildlife area. That is home to over 250,000 bats that roost underneath that bridge. Some of them are out there all year. Typically they'll start showing up in early May and then peak throughout the summer. The Yolo Basin Foundation, who's our nonprofit partner here in the wildlife area, has tours that people can go out. They talk about the bats. You can see the bats. It's one of the things that I would highly recommend. I do it, you know, each year with my family. They love it. It's fun. Mosquitoes are not that bad because we work with our vector control agency to reduce the amount of mosquitoes that we have. So it's probably one of the highlights for people that come to the wildlife areas to see the bats. It's a unique thing. The other year when I was out, They had a peregrine falcon that was basically taking bats when they were coming out. It's pretty cool to see. So that's unique. That's the first time I've ever seen that. Again, so contact the Yolo Basin Foundation or tell people about it. And it's a really family-friendly, total fun day for evening.
Work this year at the Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area included the completion of 3 major sub-projects. Work at the Y removed undersized culverts with a large precast bridge structure. By removing the small culverts, water is no longer restricted and can flow freely through the system, reducing flooding of the access roads, reducing beaver blockages and maintenance, and allows the wetland habitats to drain in the spring to support wintering waterfowl, shorebirds, and other wetland-dependent species. Additional improvements at the Y include expanding conveyance capabilities. This includes excavation of existing canals so they are deeper and wider. Canal and water control structure improvements allow greater volume and control for flood up and drawdown of rice fields and managed seasonal wetlands. Excavated material is sidecast and compacted to improve access for operations and maintenance of wetlands and wildlife-friendly agriculture. The wetland units at Parker Pond were originally constructed in the late 1990s. However, water elevations in Parker Pond did not get high enough for water managers to flood the newly constructed wetland units. Subproject 5 constructs a new pump station to lift water from Parker Pond to the wetland units for wintering waterfowl, shorebirds, and other wetland-dependent species. A forebay and larger afterbay were constructed to support high flood-up rates to reduce mosquito production. Project activities at the Rice Corner improves drainage along the South Davis Drain, which in turn improves access throughout the Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area by alleviating flooding along the roadway east and south of the Rice Corner. The project replaces culverts and parallel road crossings with a single precast concrete bridge known as a conspan. Thank you to the Delta Conservancy and the Wildlife Conservation Board for funding the project, and to all the individuals who helped make this project a reality. We look forward to sharing the project improvements for Greens Lake and the new Cross Canal pump station next year.
Wetlands are special places, and we're so lucky to have the Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area right here within view of the Sacramento skyline. We can enjoy the wetlands, we need to conserve the wetlands, and we need to spread the word about their importance. And that's what Yolo Basin Foundation is all about. Our mission is to expand the public's appreciation and stewardship of the wetlands and wildlife in the Yolo Basin through education and innovative partnerships. And this is what your Bucks for Ducks or contributions support. Our online auction is now open. Check it out to see what items you can't live without. Bid now and bid often. We also hope to see you at Saturday's Bucks for Ducks Showcase event, which includes our Fund a Need and our live auction. The event starts at 6 p.m. All the details and links can be found online at yolobasin.org/bucksforducks. Thank you for watching, and thank you for your support.